Hello, everybody. So in this one, we're going to look river calls. And let's get into it. So we 3-bet. We bet small. It's pretty standard. And now we face this type of bet. So these type of situations, often when we 3-bet, so if we go back, if we 3-bet over here, we will see that in position, out of position range after c-bet gets very tight. And because this type of ranges get very tight, on the river, they will have a lot of value bets, right? Because they have all the pairs and stuff like that. So the requirement over here for us to call, obviously, is that our opponent is bluffing. So if you're going to check this, let's start with the sim. But the idea is they need to bluff basically everything, like what is not showdown value, and because of that, often these are being underbluffed. So I'm not a big fan of my call here at nines. So let's take a look from the start. So this is our opening, our opponent's opening range. We go ahead and we 3-bet over here. Seems pretty normal. And this is our opponent's calling range, right? All the green one. And if we go to the flop, our opponent is supposed to be checking, and we're supposed to be range betting small. A little bit sizing half potting, but like for the most part, we're supposed to be sizing down. So what I just said about our opponent's ranges, we can see that these are basically the combos that will come in. That will be the weakest hands, right? So if he has ace queen, like ace queen O is supposed to be folding, ace jack O, like most pairs still defending, like it's indifferent down here. So if you go on river, so the turn was check check, so quickly check that, a little bit leading from out of position to small size. We're supposed to be barreling quite heavily here because like we still have decent amount of value and our range is not that wide, so need to keep barreling here quite a bit, but we did not. So if you look at this range now, so what does not have showdown value here? Well, ace nine, you could arguably say like it does, but like king queen, king jack, queen jack, and these like jack nines, as we can see, there is no checking, right? There is no checking. They're supposed to be betting like some a6. Again, this all comes down to like I bet the flop and the basically tight range pre-flop. Now tightening up the range on the flop because out of position player faced the bet. And even if you make argument here that maybe people will not or your population will not even find these, and let's say it's more about ace queen, for example, like let's say they overfold these, but they have this, like that means they need to bluff more a6, right? Like the bluffs need to come somewhere. So if I look at this whole line, it's kind of yeah, probably underbluffed, right? So even if you go to the small size, like I think it's they bet Appbot. This is 1/3 because you were supposed to be mixing in a call, but it's not going to be true once we think our opponent is not finding bluffs. So these 3-bet pots, whenever there is a player out of position and you bet flop, turn, whatever, you're making their range so tight because once you 3-bet, they need to call tight range, right? Especially whenever it's empty or early position. So the bluffs often have to come like full frequency and all the bottom of the range. Not always, but like in general. So these type of lines tend to, in my experience, tend to be underbluffed. I'm not really sure what was going on here. I do think this is probably just exploitatively a fold here. I think I need to go for a call because again, I just think this is going to be underbluffed in general on this type of a runout. Okay. So let's go on and move on to the next one. We can close this one. So little blind versus blind over here. we limp call, small bet, 2/3, and now we face a jam. Because I already checked it, it's going to be a call here. But I do not think so. I think this is probably going to be quite durable. And this line most likely underbluff. So if you take a look at this. So this is our limping range to green. So our opponent did use 4x. Don't think it matters too much though. We can see quite a wide range still, right? And if we go our calling range, so this is how we're going to defend. Most suited stuff, offsuit 8x, ace-x, like whatever kind of. So if you go to flop, we will see there won't be much leading, or well, any leading. And the imposition player is supposed to be go ahead and bet the range, right? Seems kind of like whatever. So once we defend here, keep in mind, because this is a range bet, it's kind of, I don't think people missing like a range bets in general. Like sure, it's like supposed to be having a little bit checks, but like in general, this type of spots, people don't like whenever it's like a range bet, people then do not miss those, I would say. So if you go to the turn, we will see that basically now we want to start taking a look. Where does the bluffs come in, right? Because if the flop is going to be range C bet, it's like people will find the bluffs, right? You can make argument about the pre-flop though, like if they find if B blind will find all of this. In my experience, I do play on a higher stakes, so people do find this. If you play lower and you don't think people really do this, then this analyze will become a little bit even different. But keep in mind that when we keep going. So where does the bluffs come from now, right? That is basically the question. So if we go to turnover here, they bet 2/3. If you look where the bluffs need to come, look at this. This is like nothing. This is zero equity hand, right? Like they basically drawing dead when they choose this. They basically drawing dead. 7x, 8x, 9x. Then look at the frequency that this is being done. This is not like, oh, I'm gonna mix like alpha frequency here. These are very high frequency barrels, right? On the jack. So this already should raise alarm bells, so to speak, that first of all, does my opponent even ISO those pre? I do think most people will, but like there will be people who won't find this, right? So these are where the bluffs come from. Like it is very likely, I would say, this is being underbluffed on the turn. I think you can make argument that people would choose to bluff queen like this region in general, maybe. And the whole idea is now they have a draw, right? If they have a draw, it's not like whenever there is a draw, it's not that difficult to find to bluff the draw. But like over here, 9/8, ace 10, ace. I guess ace jack is a pair, but like you can see the point, right? It's not that simple to bluff this spot, and we are on the turn. We're not on the river. So if you look at our strategy, so whenever it happens like, hey, my opponent is not actually even bluffing the turn, like all the bluff catches over here should be folded. Like by not bluffing, I mean not bluffing enough, right? Because they will definitely find bluffs. But the question is, will they bluff enough? Because they have decent amount of value, right? So all these like bluff catcher, a size, small bears, probably just dump it in the fold. Rest of that is quite easy. And now if we go on the river and we look at this, because they bluffed all of this, they now need to start following through on the river, right? Because if they don't follow this through on the river, again, this is not like, oh, small frequency. This is basically basically like 70-80%. You get here with the random hand. You need to fire it. You need to fire. It's not like, hey, I want to give up. No, you need to fire. And if our opponent is incapable of firing that, I do think like one thing is maybe if queen 10 and queen 9 is in their range, in that case, like they might fire those higher on a higher clip. But again, this comes down to kind of to this range, right? These hands are not going to be used that much as in the ISO range. So, but even if they are, it's still like, yo, do my opponent fire all the time? Because it's not that much mixing. I guess like with this small queen X, it's kind of mixing. But the rest of that is full frequency, right? And there is no like, oh, I'm gonna call, I'm gonna get the split, which I'm pretty sure in my head that's what I was thinking. Like, hey, if he has king 9, I'm gonna split against it. But like, will he really value jam that one? So even though like Insolver just loves the diamond combo and its full frequency call, I would say this is not a spot where people will find enough bluffs. Again, that is my opinion. You need to come up on these type of lines on your own, and it's just for you to see how I'm thinking about these spots. So all in all, I do think this call on the river probably close to a bunt. Okay, let's go on. Go on. We open. Small blind 3-bets. We call. We bet small. Small blind calls. We go check, and he bet small. Right? So I made a call over here and got shown aces. So let's take a look on this line. So this is opening range. This is going to be small blind 3-betting range. Again, keep in mind, even with pre-flop, you want to think about like, does people really 3-bet all of this? Because there is a good option as a call, even though we are very deep. If you play smaller, maybe people like to flat more of this area rather than 3-bet, and they may be 3-betting a little bit different. So keep that in mind as well, because when we're going to go ahead and look for where the bluffs are going to come from, that does matter. So if you look over here, our positions should be betting very high clip over here. They choose to check. We go for a small bet. I think it's like kind of whatever. And now let's look what happens to small blind range straight on the flop, right? They're supposed to be calling with king jack, king 10, ace jack. I think ace jack and like ace king, that's kind of like, it's not you don't need to be a fuck scientist to get this right? Like ace 4, ace 5, it's not too much of that, but like still in the range. I do think people can play like that. Like this one will be definitely like questionable. Like, will people find the small mixes pre-flop? But this range, even with by us betting small in position, is getting very tight, right? So if you go to the turn, so it wins check. We can check on that line, but like, does it really matter that much? We're like in general. So if we go to the river now, and we look at this wonder bet size, where does the bluffs come from, right? It has to come from king jack and like king 10, jack 10, another questionable hand. Will they have when they have flush draw? Yeah, sure. Even flush draws, they will like bet the flop themselves as a c bet, and they will check raise sometimes, right? So it's already also on a lower frequency, but ace like there is not too many bluffs for out of position to choose here, right? And once that is true, also the bluffing missed flush draw, basically. This is like one of those spots, even though the bet is small, don't need many bluffs, right? But you still need to bluff something, and that would not be very easy to find. Also, keep in mind, like, if we go over here, this is going for a small size. So first of all, like as we saw in a solver, that is actually the size you need to go, right? You need to bet 10% and 1/3. So once, but your opponent also has option to go bigger, right? So they really need to choose the bluff size to this as well. So we went ahead and called. I do think this line is kind of a little bit opponent dependent, but whenever we get to, again, when we get to the line where the range is so tight with bluffs, so to speak, like there are not too many to find, meaning all the combos that are bluffs in GTO, they need to use them to very high clip. Those type of spots tend to maybe be a little bit under bluffed. Then again, if somebody gets to the river with King Jack, like with a heart, I don't think it's that difficult to find the bluff though. I would argue that bluffing like Jack 10 of clubs, missed flush draw, and this stuff would probably be a little bit harder. You still have ace 4, ace 5 to bluff as well. So all in all, I'm not a big fan of the call. I don't think it matters too much. I think it is kind of close here though. If I had to guess, I'm leaning more towards folding though. Okay. So this is against the early position. Small call. Goes check, check. Over here, this is a mistake to check, in my opinion. I think I just want to bet. And the reason is like, first of all, solver would say this is a bet. But the reason really is going to be, do you want to give your opponent a chance to bluff here? Do you think, first of all, do we think our opponent is going to bluff enough here, right? Because if they're not going to bluff enough, my hand is most likely a bluff, or it's going to be considered bluff catcher, because it's very hard to see anything worse to value bet. So therefore, do I want to go for a check fold blind? Or do I want to bet small and force him to call with ace king, ace jack, like basically ace highs, and what kind of get it done with? I do think that line would be better. I went for a check call here, and let's take a look at this one. So this is low check opening range. Go and quickly check the calling range. We don't really have any top of the range here, right? As those will be 3 bets. So, wait, it's so slow sometimes. So, small bet by imposition player, kind of whatever, kind of standard. Again, if anything, I think people might be c-betting more here. It's kind of dry board. Small blind does not connect with the 4 and 2s basically at all. So we can see our range getting pretty tight over here already. We do have these like high card floats that we need to find as well. We don't have really anything else to defend, and this is so many offsuit hands, and you can't really massively overfold this type of spot. So need to find this defense. So turn goes check check, and on the river. So we can see I'm supposed to be betting, basically checking my ace highs and like kind of whatever. I choose not to bet, which is a mistake. And once we go for a check line, now the question will be like, where does the imposition bluffs come from? Well, this is going to be these hands, right? And basically, whenever they have king high, because that is like the bottom of the range, like you can't really have much worse than that. I guess like some of this, but like for the most part it's there. But what about offsuit? You always kind of want to think about offsuit, right? So king jack o is actually bluffing quite often here. I don't think a size would find bluff here, because like whenever it's like ace, this type of run out, people tend to just check it down. And over here, because imposition player does have a king jack o and like this stuff, it's not that difficult probably to find the bluffs, I would say, because like when if you end up with a 9 high on the river, you're probably gonna bluff it, right? And you're not even supposed to do that all the time. But it is like a little bit questionable in sense of king jack o, whenever you get to the river, it's quite a high frequency bluff here, right? But another point to make over here is, do we expect our opponent always to value bet the den, right? Because over here, this is like betting all the 10x, right? For value, even like nines. So if our opponent actually don't find all the value bets, the frequency of these bluffs should also go down, right? Because there is no value, you need to, if there is not enough value, or value to bluff ratio needs to be correct. So if they're missing a lot of value bets, they actually need to miss these bluffs as well, because otherwise they would be over bluffing. So all in all, in this line, I think I like the check call, because I checked. I do think it's going to be a mistake to check here, though. As we can see, you just want to bet very small with your pairs. And another thing to show over here is, let's say we choose this 1/3 bet size, just to show like, now we are forcing in position player to start making hero calls with ace size, right? Ace king probably calls more often than like you would expect like ace 5, ace 6 to call. But like this line could also be maybe even a little bit too often hero called, actually. If you go 1/3, I do think it's close, because like ace 9, ace 8, like will people really defend these, right? But like there's also pairs, so all in all seems very nice to go for a bet. And if we bet small, which I think is probably going to be the best one, is this line is like, first of all, you bet one big blind, right? So it's 10% bet. If somebody has ace high, they will probably bet you off. You can even see king highs need to find sometimes defend here, which is kind of crazy. But then again, it's one big blind bet. The guy needs to defend. You can make argument over here that if they don't call with a king high, that it's going to be overfolded. I think it's a little bit like not 100% sure, because it is one big blind bet. I do think ace size are quite easy to find. Only the argument, or like only thing I would think over here by betting one is it like, because once you bet one, like you can see these raises, right? This means they are defense, right? If you click all these due bet raises to a fold, you're gonna end up a way higher fold percentage, and that cannot basically that cannot happen. So it is like likely it might be actually overfolded, but because it's, again, we are on the river, operating with very tight ranges, bet size is 1, so cannot 100% be sure about this stuff, and kind of depends about your opponent as well. But if this is going to be true, then you want to kind of bluff more to that size, even though like bet one is like, if not that simple to bluff, right? So I do think it was a mistake by my part. I do prefer just betting myself. Okay, let's take a look at another one. So eights, jack, jack. check call, and we face this. So another blind versus blind like line with a check, and this one like I don't really mind this much, I guess, because the turn sizing is kind of small. Only thing is like my blockers are not going to be greatest because kind of want the guy has like 8-6, 8-3, 8-4, 8-7, right? So because of that, the blockers are not going to be great over here, but the sizing is kind of small. And whenever people go like, why don't he size like 2/3 or something if he had an ace or even if he had a 9, right? So we went for a goal and the guy had 9 deuce. So let's take a look on this one. So this is our limping range. This is in position checking range, so it doesn't really have top of the range. And let's go to the flop. So flop is quite a high frequency bet for our opposition player. We will take a look at the whole line and then we'll come back a little bit about this bet one. Just like let's first check the checking line. You can see our 8 are high frequency check over here. In retrospect, like in general, depends on my opponent. I often actually like to range bet these spots, and I will explain why. So this is our opponent's range. Whenever they have a 9x, quite decent amount of betting on the flop. So if you go to the turn, versus in position range, this one now, again, as we can even see over here, there is a little bit this bet one, and it's like with a weaker hand, so to speak, like more around 5x than a 9. So, because I double checked, if you go over here, if I double check, like a lot of like quite a bit of my 9x is in my betting range on the flop and on a turn, right? So kind of want to go ahead and choose this a little bit bigger size. Then again, some people might just bet one, and that's like their default sizing over there, right? So once they bet, we do have a call over here, but like let's also take a look where does the bluff comes from. High frequency, 8, 8x, 7x, 10x. Keep in mind, these are offsuit hands. Again, like obviously you can look over here, all of this stuff, but like we want to focus more on offsuit hands because suited hands is like, they're just so few combos, right? So we can see like these are very high frequency bets over here. You can make argument maybe people like more like this region, like yeah, like so, like 6, 7, 8, 6. Like I do think these people would like more to bet these, and this could be a little bit higher frequency or like this, but like I'm not sure if people will find all of this as bluffs. And because of that, it might be already under bluffed, right? So if we go over here, we can take a look like, hey, we need to defend actually queen highs. Not like wheels are like kind of whatever because we beat the bluff, so to speak, with the queen high. And we still have a draw to the nuts. So king highs, queen highs, maybe want to even be a little bit tighter over here if we expect our opponent not to find all the bluffs, which seems realistic. And just even saying that, you can already see like where we're heading on the river, right? So over here we actually have a decent amount of leads, which is very interesting. But I did not choose that option. And now with all these bluffs, we can see like these are quite a high frequency barrel throws, right? So the question becomes again, will my opponent find these bluffs? You do see that like queen highs, jack highs mostly do give up. But this is quite a high. Like if you have 6-4, it's not like, oh, I want to give up. No, you barrel. You barrel. If you choose that option on the turn, you barrel. And once this bluff frequency, these bluffs are not being found there, then this call becomes kind of bad, right? So if we go ahead and look at our range, H wants to fall just because of a blocker thing. But if you look even over here, like king highs, queen highs, like these like to bluff catch over eights because you don't want to block these bluffs over here, would be my guess, because it's a blocker thing. But once we expect this to be under bluffed line, what would in reality should be happening is we don't really bluff catch those lines, right? We don't need to bluff catch. So 5x bluff catcher, queen x bluff catcher, king x bluff catcher, the small bears bluff catchers, right? If you go back and look at where the value comes, well, the value comes from like this ace x. So those would not be just the bluff catchers because we would split sometimes, like ace king, we repeat value. But this is like the way you want to think about this line. So going to the flop, back to the flop is what I mentioned before. So let me pull this spot. These ace-high boards are very likely to be overfold. Maybe not as much in higher stakes, but like in lower stakes, when I grinded to meet stakes, people tended to like not find defense. And the whole idea over here is because two ranges, small blind, big blind, limp pot, two ranges are extremely wide. So the question would be, if I bet one, what is big blind's worst hand they need to defend? Because if they don't defend and they overfold, that means I can expand my range by betting like let's say they overfold 5-10%. That means we get to range bet this, right? So if we go over here and look at the big blind's defending range, we will see like, hey, if he has a 6-high backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, these need to defend, right? 7-high. I don't think this part is difficult though, because you have a gut shot, but like 10-high, jack high, like if you expect your opponent to fold more than this, which once you start folding all of this, these are offsuit defense, it can get very quickly to 30%, right? And if it gets to 30%, what is going to happen is, well, they're folding way too often. So you want to bet and take the pot down. Another thing to mention here, once you bet your range, it changes your turn strategy in sense of like, if your exploit is that in position player is overfolding this, let's say they overfold all of this. They just defend like they fold like 35, defend 65. Now think about what happens on the turn. On any turn, your range is all the hands you got limp pre-flop. And your opponent's range is now a lot stronger because you bet and made them overfold, because that is the whole idea why you want to make that bet, because or like why you get to make that bet, small bet with range is they are overfolding. So now you are strengthening this range by a ton, right? So you need to be very mindful. Like a lot of turn strategies goes like range check, because like you are playing with a wide range against a strong tight range. Even though it's blind, there's blind, but like that's the way you want to think about. So also, if you bet and you take all of this away, again, this is kind of like if you even get to make this assumption, it might not be easy to bluff for on this type of lines on the turns and rivers for in position player, because you strengthened this type of a range a lot, right? Unless, so we can even go and look on the turn. Let's say somebody does find all of this, and let's just put the juice in. And once this is true, and let's say we're going to barrel 2/3, because the flop range was very strong. What happens now on the turn? What is the hands that in position player still has to defend on the turn after second barrel? Like there are some king highs. I do think 5-high is not like pair of fives is not that difficult and probably over defended. But look at this region here. There is no folding or like close to no folding with a gut shot with 870, 670, and 760. This is a high, like, this is offsuit. This is high frequency defend here. So you can make art, you might think that, well, maybe this is actually going to be overfolded now to a second barrel. In that case, you bet flop, bet turn, right? Because if there is overfold, you want to keep going. So let's change this to some other card, not the second flush draw, just to see what happens. Now there is nothing. And like there is nothing in sense of no folding. And the reason is being that there is less flush draws to defend. So you started folding all the spades, all the suited spades, right? But because you folded suited spades, now you need to find the defense with something else. That something else have to be your gut shots and high guard hands, or in this case, this part heavily. You can make, again, I do think making argument that people will call more often with the bears is very valid here, though. But it's not going to make it up with all of this because I would imagine people would fold this. Not everybody, but quite a lot. So this blinders blind, this type of like betting flop, second barreling, like because you're operating very wide ranges, I think there can be a lot of opportunities doing play exploitatively on those lines. Okay, and let's get this one in. So it's a 3-bet pot. Our opponent opens, we 3-bet. Our opponent calls. We bet small here. And goes check, check. And our opponent bets very big. Right? So let's take a look. So this is our opponent's opening range, 36. We're going for a 3-bet. Opponent's calling range. So this is bottom versus cutoff, right? Just to go quickly through these ranges. On the flop, we just range betting it. And if you take a look now on our opponent's range, right? Again, because we 3-bet and c-bet, want to take a look, where is the air on the river coming from? That is going to determine kind of like what's happening over here, right? So over here we can see like king queen needs to defend. Ace-10 is fold, like, whatever. What else? Queen 9, that will be defended. It's a cut shot, right? King 10 with a back to flush draw, back to straight draw. I don't know if people will defend. Can see it happening. This one's not 100% sure. It's not that easy to find. Again, it is a little bit different than we saw earlier, where the goaler, the guy who faced 3-bet, was early position, so got off and button. As we can see, like the pre-flop ranges you get to the flop getting a little bit different than in the previous example. But all in all, not sure if there would be any overfolding happening here. But looking at this range, there will be some type of bluffs available on the river. On a turn check lines, right? You want to think of that. And over here we can see we are supposed to be barreling turn with ace king to some extent. King queen, like all this stuff kind of barrels. We did not choose to barrel, and our opponent sizes up on the river. Aye. So misclick by me. Let me let's put it back on. I had it all figured out and then we misclicked. So jack. So this is our opponent's range now. So our opponent chooses size like 10. No, it was big size, right? Yeah, it's like 2/3. So we're gonna choose, I guess we're just gonna go with the 24. But let's look at the whole strategy. A lot of betting 10%. and like bet small, right? And if you look at the bluffs, there is not much checking anymore, right? Because like there's a lot of value bets. There are a lot of value bets because tournaments check. So my range. So if you go over here, if I add a jack, we can see like most jack X is barreling to turn. If I have queens, kings, aces, it's barreling to turn, right? Like I don't really have, even my tens and nines are barreling on the turn quite often. So my range by default is weak. So if you go and bet the small 10%, we will see like we will see our in position players defend, aka us, is going to come from defending ace highs because that is kind of top of our range. This is ace king go, ace queen o. This is how we need to defend. So even if we change the bet size to 1/3, you see it's like it's still the same. I just don't have anything better. Sure, I have some suited 8x and some pair, but that's about it. Most of the weight of my range is offsuit ace-x because those are where my check is going to happen on the turn. So because of that, it gives out of position. It gives out of position a chance to just value bet any pair they have, right? If this is going to happen, then there is a lot of value bet, so to speak. But because the size is small, you don't really need, with these small sizes, you don't really need that many bluffs, right? So if this is happening, we can even see like ace-x is supposed to be bluffing. I don't think this is ever happening, but this is like the bet small. Bet big is where we need the bluffs, right? Because choosing a big size is kind of polarizing. So the option to bluff there is definitely there. But will people bluff? Because if they choose this small size. So another thing is like, if somebody don't have this bet 10% on the river, then this 10%, a lot of these hands will go to a check range, I would say. And if that is going to be true, then you get to bluff a little less, so to speak, as well. But you really want to think about it, as I explained before, how big part of my opponent's range needs to bluff here. And looking at it, it's basically whenever you have a king high or worse, you need to bluff. There is no checking. Like sure, a little bit here and there, but for the most part, there is no checking. And because of that, it again raises a question: do we want to go ahead and bluff catch? Over here, I tend to just think in general, mostly these are going to be underbluffed. This is my opinion. I don't think it's going to be true if you play against very good players and higher stakes. I do think it's going to be true against some opponents in those games. In lower stakes, I don't really have that much experience recent years as I have not played those too many. So also there are different player pools, like you can play in American sides, Canadian sides, France, whatever, Asia. So it kind of like a little bit depends on the player pools as well, because I do believe some player pools have different misses, so to speak. And if you look over here, the guy had king 8. He chose quite big, and which is fine. I don't think it matters too much. And if you go and look at this line, like I think it's quite obvious we need to defend here, even if we go for the bigger size, because this is where all our weight comes in, right? Let's say even against Solent, probably just falls double. It's still like indifferent. It's still indifferent. It's like always going to be called. But the question still remains is like, do we expect our opponent to find all of these bluffs to that size? Keep in mind, the sizing matters as well, because we can see like all the sizes are being used over here, right? And like, I'm going to go ahead and say probably not. Another thing is like, they can also choose to bluff smaller size, right? you can make argument that maybe they go this size and they choose a6 to bluff now. That could make sense because if they want to bluff a6, I do believe that people would not choose this bet, like very small bet sizes with a6. So it would make a lot of sense if somebody sized up with a6 bluff. So this is it from me for this time, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, everybody.